capacity to observe that the universe is very intelligible. And we can understand it on very large cosmic levels and on very simple quantum, very base quantum levels. So from from seeing it as a cosmos, a universal structure in some way, or seeing it below the level of atoms, we can understand it very intelligibly. How is that possible? Because most of our experience as human beings on our level of seeing things is that it goes back to almost using Paley's argument from design. If you see something complex, like for example, my BlackBerry, you would say that there's maybe some type of intelligence. It has the science of intelligence behind it. There's something intelligent behind it. And that's a reasonable case to observe. And we don't normally observe in the universe that these type of structure just happens by happenstance. I mean, even given the laws of the universe as we define them, of magnetism, of the law of gravity, for example, etc., the ones that our physicists and cosmologists speak of and we hear about at universities and become part of our culture and giving us technologies that we love. At the end of the day, are you going to say then to me that it's these laws that in themselves are the origin of the universe? Because laws themselves are just abstractions. Are they inherent there? Is there really a thing called E equals mc squared floating around out there that explains the relation that really exists as matter and energy relationship? The answer is probably not. There really isn't something like that out there. But it's definitely a descriptive language of a reality of the universe on one level. A relationship between matter and energy. How is that? How can we determine that? How do we have the capacity to understand that? That's something for us to think about. Intelligibility. How is that the case, that we can do that? And not only that, human beings have a rather surplus amount of intelligence. I mean, if you take a strict Darwinian approach towards things, if Darwin was right on some crude level that, or Richard Dawkins, what's the purpose of a living organism is to make sure its genes get passed on. It can replicate itself. Just like that. Make sure that it can replicate itself. So we can have babies, and those babies can be combined, from two parents, if it's that way. And then they will share their DNA, and that DNA then will recombine into a single strand again, and it will replicate itself, and that's the purpose of, that's what it's about. Okay. Well, we're doing that already, and we've been doing it for a long time. And if it's about survival, well, what does a human being need to survive? Think about it. You need food. You need enough food to eat, enough things to protect yourself from extreme weather conditions. But that's basically it. And in some way to get a spouse. If you want to survive, if you want your species to continue, you want a spouse. You want to get together and have kids. Pardon me. If that's the case, then obviously we've met the quota of survivability. And our intelligence allows us to do that. But why do we seem to have this excess amount of intelligence? What's the benefit of understanding quantum physics? How does quantum physics benefit us as a species on a basic Darwinian approach toward survivability? How does poetry do that? How do people who study philosophy do that? What's the benefit of that? Speculation. Understanding syllogistic reasoning. What's the benefit in that? It doesn't really help us. And we've got a lot of excess intelligence there. Why? Well, obviously, one benefit of that is, unlike any other creature on this planet, that excess intelligibility, or how we are as sentient, intelligent beings, we're able to really observe the universe and actually understand it in a way that everything else still functioning on those things that we describe with laws of nature and laws of physics, etc., etc. Yes, those laws of physics affect an amoeba, they affect a bird of paradise in New Guinea, and they affect the sun, and they affect Alpha Centauri, and they affect a black hole. So we don't know what happens past the event horizon there. Our physics breaks down there, and our understanding breaks down. We don't know. But why this excess intelligence? And yet, from a religious perspective, the thing about this, how does God reveal himself from our perspective as Muslims? On one level, God reveals himself by helping us to understand structure in the universe. It's a very base understanding. Can you create a fly like that? That's a Quranic, challenge. Can you create a fly wing? We can understand fly. I mean, I study entomology, and insects. It's my degree. And insects are quite the most abundant animals on the planet. 80% of all animals are insects. Very complex. Very fascinating things that go on with them. And even if we said we might be able to create a fly wing with our technology today, we could not reconstruct it by taking just biological compounds and instructing them to create it. We could take a fly cell with a DNA that is already encoded with a set of templates that produce proteins eventually that can work together to construct that, but we cannot take the basic elements and then create our own coding machine that will produce organically from organic carbon-based molecules a fly wing. So the Quranic challenge is an interesting challenge. Maybe at the time of the prophets I saw them, people were really impressed by just a fly wing being so tiny, yet it can carry a fly. But now we can maybe create something maybe synthetic as a film or a structure that can mimic a fly wing, but on an organic level, no, we still can't do that. So that challenge might still be there, chronically. But the point is, that structure that we see around us, we explain that in very deep levels. But why? So this idea of our intelligence being able for us to examine things on many levels is very interesting, that there's one level where Allah expresses his being, that he exists, and that is the common man approach. Hey, look at the world around you and try to explain it. Have they not observed the camel, how it was made? So Allah says, look at camels. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But on a different level is, the level of intelligence, is that's what God does on the revelatory level. The level of God revealing himself through sacred speech. That God addresses our intellect directly with complex symbolism, the symbolism of language. And that complexity is very important for us. I mean, what is the Quran? It's a sequence of Arabic letters. You start with Alif Lam, Ha Mim, Dal, Alhamdu, then Lam, and you continue with a sequence of letters, and you read those sequence of letters, and you get something intelligible from it. And if you took all the letters in the Quran, right? You took the Quran as a text in Arabic, and you took little blocks of Arabic letters, of all letters of the Quran, and jumbled them around, you'll never produce the Quran. You have the same number of letters. If you count all the letters in the Quran, Alif, the Baz, the Taz, the Jeems, the Haz, the Ains, the Ains, put them in a box, you'll never produce a Quran. You'll get a jumble of letters in Arabic, but that's all you're going to get. You can do it probably for a good trillion years, you probably still won't get the sequence that produces, quote-unquote, the Quran. Just as a sequence of letters that give you that you can read, you can have something intelligible come from that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from our perspective, reveals himself not through just signs, and that's what we're talking about today, looking at the world around us, but on a higher top-down level, in a way, through addressing our intelligence. But that's another discussion. So once we've, it's like, I have a quote, it's like Sherlock Holmes, told Dr. Watson that he didn't care if the Earth went around the sun or vice versa. It had no relevance to the pursuit of his daily life. Why do we need this stuff? Why do we need to know these extra things to our intelligence about what happens to the molecule on such a thing? What's the purpose of it? This one maybe I don't need it to make my breakfast in the morning. I don't need it to understand anything. It doesn't really affect me. I mean, for thousands of years, people have lived on this planet, civilizations have come and gone without understanding anything about an atom. Not even knowing there was such a thing as an atom at all. And yet here they were living, and life was good, and life was bad. So why is it so important, this intelligibility? Especially in our time, the details of it. Well, one may be that in a time when people lose faith in God, because in the past, people believed in God very simplistically. They looked around them and said, there must be a God. It became almost natural for them to come to such a conclusion. It's like Abu Hanifa arguing with the Zindaka. The man said, I don't believe in a God. And so Abu Hanifa said, what if I told you, that these these logs were flowing down the Tigris, a river, you know, and these logs sort of jumbled all together and formed a bridge. Would you believe that? He said, no, I couldn't believe that. So think about that. It was a very simplistic argument Abu Hanifa gave of causality. You don't see just, you know, logs down you know, like going on now in Calgary, you know, in Canada. That river is flooding. All these pine trees are flowing down through Calgary and clogging up the bridges. But you don't see these logs just making log jams, forming a suspension bridge. It's never happened. We've never observed that. That's what Abu Hanifa was saying to this man. Have you ever observed that? That explained then the complexity of things around you. So that man went around thinking around the year 740. Maybe there really is a God. That made him think. But today, you've got Darwin, and you've got, you know, 150 years of Darwinism and evolutionary biology, and a lot of thousands of very intelligent people trying to explain that. Then God, on that approach, gets sort of pushed aside. And maybe it's not as explainable. So let's say now that Allah opened up for humanity a deeper understanding of the functionality of the universe on deeper levels. Perhaps that's something we need in our time, in order then to address just one issue. Does God exist or not? Because with modern people, it's a really hard thing to believe in God, for a lot of people. And so maybe that's why we need the complexity of our time. Just so it allows us to have more reasons to reflect upon, to draw a case for the deity, whether it exists or not. So, I've covered that. So one of the things that we need to think about, and this is something that, and I wanted to share a book with you. I have it here on my, and anyone who's interested in this, is a book. It's called "Is There a God?" or There Is a God," and it's basically a book by the ex-atheist Anthony Flew. Anthony Flew was probably the most well-known atheist in the past 50 years. He was the most aggressive articulator of atheism that was there from the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And most atheists today, whether it's Dennett or Dawkins or anyone else who follow, you know, they were all influenced by the works of Anthony Flew. And Anthony Flew argued, you know, the case for that there is no God with such people as C.S. Lewis, the very well-known Christian thinker, who's been very much influenced in many Christian thinkers today. If you go on Christian websites, everyone reads C.S. Lewis. He debated with C.S. Lewis. He wrote about 20-odd books on atheism and why there is no God. He's a philosopher. But a few years ago, he changed his mind. He believes in God now. They may not believe in the God of the Bible or the God of the Quran, but he calls it a higher intelligence. And one of the reasons why, in this book of his, and the title of the book is There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. You might want to get that book and read it. It's not like a tour de force book on really deep proofs, but it's based upon some principal things that he realized. And it goes back to what I'm trying to help you all to see today in my discussion. And that is, how do we explain the complexity of the world around us? That was Anthony Flew's big turning point to leave atheism. In the past 15 years, maybe the past 20 years, we've had such an increase in understanding the complexity of the universe on a cosmic level and on a micro level in ways that we never had before. And the question is, it's not just complex, it's very intelligent. How it is. And so the big answer is, how is it that way? So all of you, how many of you guys have heard of fine-tuning? Fine-tuning. Okay. I figured you all knew about that. What's fine-tuning? You know what it is, don't you? You know what fine-tuning is? Who knows what fine-tuning is? Anyone thought about it? Okay. In the past, huh? Go ahead.
To make something more clear, to clarify, to make it more, if it's dark, make it brighten.
Okay. What I mean by fine-tuning is this.
We brighten it.
when we look at, here's a book I want you, I mean, it's a Christian book, so unfortunately it's hard to get, unless you go to some Muslim websites to get these things. And some of those websites are, I don't know, they're interesting to say the least. This is a book called The Creator and The Creator and the Cosmos, and it goes to this issue, and I want to get to that other point. One of the things that has to be explained, and this is becoming quite clear, is that how do you explain that the physical constraints of the universe, the energy parameters, etc., that restrict how atoms form, how electrons exist, how photons function on these levels, how they work mathematically in very, very precise ranges. That if they're off by too much, and usually these are, 0.00 amounts mathematically, then, for example, hydrogen couldn't form. What would be the problem if there was no hydrogen in the universe right now? What's the big problem if there's no hydrogen? What would we not have if there was no hydrogen? What else would we not have? Huh? Light. Where does that light come from? How is that light produced in the sun? Well, how is it? It's just, a lot of gravity, a lot of hydrogen being squeezed under very high pressure. Because of the gravity being very tight, it creates friction. There's a lot of energetic processes due to that mass in a very dense space. High energy levels are so high that the atoms of hydrogen can fuse and produce helium, and the process release a photon of energy, a light particle in that. Now, but where did the hydrogen come from?